In this video, we're looking at Chapter 33, which is based on Java Server Faces. There should be an S at the end of that, just so you know. These are the objectives for the chapter, which you can also read in your book. As you take a look at this list of objectives, you're going to notice that it's actually pretty far-reaching, because really what we're learning is a new technology, and this is a technology that really fits pretty well with your web developer degree, in that we've learned how to write Java. Now we're going to start putting Java on a server, and the server will run the Java and then render the web page for us. So you can kind of do a comparison to how PHP works or Node.js works, where there's a server-side component, and the job of the server-side component is to render an HTML page for us. So we will write the code that will give us programmatic logic and then render the output to the web browser, as opposed to either a console or a windowed environment like we've learned so far. The techniques that you learned using Java effects, you will find in many cases will transfer nicely over to this format, provided that you understand that you're going from programming language to a custom web language. Okay, so not only are we blending with HTML, we're running what they call custom XHTML, which is a very specific XML namespace that defines unique tags that are used only with Java. Okay, so this is the modern approach, and you can see we're going to cover a lot of different things. There's a few new concepts here. Some of the more important ones are the beans, things towards the bottom where we start to track sessions. We've talked about that a little bit in Web Programming 2 from an HTML perspective, using JavaScript tools, different approaches with Java. And I'd say those are probably the more important topics here, aside from the fact that we're also going to look at a different IDE. So we're going to be working with NetBeans. The reason we're working with NetBeans is because of the integrated servers that come with the full package. When you download NetBeans as an IDE, and let's say you have nothing else loaded on your system, NetBeans is pretty nice because it, unlike Eclipse, it doesn't expect you to know that you have to go out and download Java, the JDK, the runtime environment, all that stuff you have to download before you even play with Eclipse. NetBeans just goes out there, recognizes what's there, what's not, pulls it in, installs it on your system as part of its installation process. If you get that complete version of NetBeans, it also bundles in the capability to work with a number of other languages aside from Java. It has built into it all the Java FX stuff, so all the modern graphical tools. It also bundles in the Java EE. We've been so far coding with the Java SE, which is the standard edition. EE stands for Enterprise Edition, and most business coding on the enterprise level happens with that version of Java as opposed to SE. It really is designed more for high-end application development. Also bundled in are a couple of server environments. One is called Glassfish, and the other one is called Tomcat. Glassfish is a web server not unlike Apache. It is geared to work well with Java backend code. And the other one, Tomcat, is a tool that allows Java applications to operate on a remote server. So for example, if I was trying to run Java programs that will dish out web pages on Khronos, Khronos would need a Tomcat server running on top of the OS in order to execute that process. We have that built into NetBeans, and all you basically have to do is point to the repository that runs it. It's a kind of an interesting program, Tomcat, because that's all it requires. It doesn't require installation. You just point to it and it runs. So the neat thing is, because Tomcat is already on your system by virtue of having XAMPP present, one of the ways that you get Tomcat to run is by just very simply pointing to the folders where Tomcat is located within the XAMPP installation, and it will run. So if you have any issues with it not showing up, we can make it show up. That's my point. And depending on how your machines were configured, when they built the image, you don't always get the benefit of having somebody that uses the software configure it. So sometimes you run into some cumbersome issues. But we will overcome those, not really a very big deal. All right, so what are these? I think I kind of mentioned this already. It says it separates the web user interface from Java code. So really we're just using the web as our delivery mechanism. This is an approach that has kind of superseded what we used to do in the past. When I first learned Java, I learned Java so we could write applets. Applets run inside of a browser but require a plugin. So you'd have to download a separate extension for your browser, install it. You'd also have to have Java running on your system. And then the applet downloads and executes within the browser. So what you basically were having is you were giving the browser the capability of running executables natively. Now that caused a lot of security problems, to the point where a lot of major vendors, now Google included, have removed Java support from their browsers because it caused such a significant problem with security. If somebody can run an executable in your browser and you're really gullible, click here, you won $1 million, or play Candy Crush for free or whatever it is, and all of a sudden, you have all this stuff on your system you don't want, So that's a way to work around it. Just very much the same way, think of how PHP works. Your code needs to be running on a server in order for it to be able to render those pages. All right. All right. So one thing we're going to see here is how we're going to work with creating a project. Don't worry about taking notes on this. At this point, this is just going to be real quick little snapshots, and then we're going to jump into the chapter and actually, work our way through it manually. It's important that you guys get the feel for it, and part of it is because we're moving to a new IDE. So those of you that haven't played with NetBeans yet, you're going to be learning a new tool. So now that you're comfortable with Eclipse, we're changing it up. All right. So you should never be intimidated. You should always try to embrace new tools. Don't be afraid of them. You might just find them intuitive. Once you learn a complicated IDE, you learn to expect certain things. And then when you switch from one IDE to another, you'll see that some are better at some things and some are better at other things. A lot of people really who are into Java, there's a very strong division. People are either like Eclipse people or NetBeans people. And they get on one and they like one or the other. Like if you listen to Christopher talk, he's like, oh, NetBeans, NetBeans is the bomb. And the truth is, NetBeans is cool because it also helps you with a lot of other web-centric languages, like PHP, like HTML, JavaScript, CSS. It has really nice JavaScript tools built in, and you can also do like C++ and languages like that. All right, so they walk you through the process of creating a new project, and these are some of the screens you're going to see. Some important things here is, picking which server you're going to run, making sure you pick the right Java version. Those are all very important. You also will pick the type of language that you're using. They're calling it a framework here, because that's in essence what it is. And then you can see here like a really quick little snapshot of what Java XML based XHTML looks like code-wise down here, and we're going to see that in person shortly, like right now. Notice that there's kind of dual multi-doc type declarations going on here in the code. So at the very core, at the top, we're really working with an XML file. Any markup language really is XML, whether you see the XML tag at the top or not. The reason this is placed at the top is to make sure that it's parsed correctly on the server side, because not only is it going to be executing the HTML portion, it's also going to be executing custom tags like I was mentioning before. So you can see that instead of using the doc type HTML, the HTML5 approach, we are back to the XHTML 1.0 approach, which was our previous HTML standard up until a little over a year ago. So that's got a really long doc type. The other thing that's important to note is that when you're working with these weird custom languages that you have what we call XML namespaces, and that is one of the things that in XHTML was required to make sure that your document knew what rule set to follow, because it literally points to the rule set. And then on top of it, you have this one, which is the one that should be completely new to you, and that is where it says XML namespace : H. The H's are prefixes for all the custom HTML or XHTML tags that go in, and whenever you're throwing something in, for example, you use something like this where you preface what would be a normal HTML tag with H:, and really what that's doing is it's giving a directive to the server to write the HTML for you. So this isn't really the HTML, it is the directive to write the HTML using the Java tools in the back end. All right. When we get to JSP, or Java Server Pages, instead of faces, they have a different prefix, and you'll see that when we get there. But that does point to a library, and notice it's not part of W3. It points to the Java repositories. And if you're not familiar with the fact that Sun Microsystems owns Oracle, right, which owns MySQL and Java and the Oracle DB and you know, so that's why you see sun.com. All right, one thing that you can do with Java Server Faces is you can actually work with what they call Java Beans. And Java Beans can be viewed as kind of like these small little entities unto themselves that can perform particular functions. Once created, you can pick them up and make them portable and move them from project to project. So that's why they're called beans. Java Beans do exist outside of Java Server Faces. So that concept kind of transfers a little bit. But just to give you an example of what a Java Bean looks like, it looks like a Java program. It's got a couple different directives here. You can see the @ symbol, which basically tells the compiler that we're working with that type of a tool. You do your standard program coding, give it a name. That's a real simple one. That's one that we're going to be doing real quickly here. Yeah, and this is something we're going to be doing shortly, so that's why I'm not spending a lot of time on it. But what they're showing you is you write the bean, it executes a method that gets the time, just returns the time using built-in tools, and then whatever other expressions you want to throw in with it, and then you just use this simple approach here to actually execute the bean. So you can write a little snippet of code that points to a standalone program, and it does it. Some of the graphical components, you guys were asking about grid views, and they do have tools that are like that, although this is more for layout as opposed to grasping data. So they do have list boxes here as well, and data tables and columns, so you can see all the different approaches. Notice the prefix. So all of these are XHTML custom tags that you would have to list as follow in order to evoke the certain kind of controls that you're going to be using. So all these GUI components are in essence user controls of one form or another. All right, so here you have an example of rendering output to the browser instead of a windowed environment, instead of the console. Okay, and I know I say this over and over again, but that is our modern paradigm where the browser has really become the universal client. And when I was younger and I was, in school, I think even, they were talking about the web browser as a universal client, and everybody's like, yeah, right. Like, you're going to run applications inside of a browser, you can barely get static HTML to work right. And here we are in the era where even a lot of applications that seem like they're applications are really just web pages. Why? Because browsers work on every platform. You can write code that executes for every environment. That's the other appeal of Java, because here in like a Macintosh environment where a lot of people will not run Java, they get really paranoid, right? Because it is a security hole even on a Mac. This gives us an approach to feed Java applications to people that way. All right, some of the exercises are ones that you've seen before or very similar to the ones that you've seen before, both in chapter and homework assignments. There's basically 2 homework assignments that are happening in this chapter. I just added another one. You guys are like, just one assignment? But the second assignment is going to kind of be a repeat of the one that you're doing for chapter 32. You're just doing it in a web browser format. So the nice thing is once you have your SQL query, I mean, that was like the hard part, right? So now you get to reuse that, and you're just switching graphical views. The other one that's in the chapter as an exercise is the session tracking. And that's something we looked at in Web Programming 2, where you go to a website, you're doing something, you're interacting with the server, and how does the server keep track of the fact that it's still you, that you're still interacting? And that's what session tracking is all about. It's a very important concept. Finally, there's going to be some validation stuff that we do. Notice that here we start to use a different prefix, the letter F. So when we start using that, that's going to require a different namespace in order for those things to happen. But notice that what they've done is they basically have created a library that allows you to natively validate certain things, so you don't have to go through the laborious process of writing validation scripts. It really helps accelerate that process. So that's chapter 33 in a nutshell. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to jump in. I'm going to manually walk us through the chapter. If you've already begun working on the chapter, I would invite you to, if you want to go off to another room and work, that's fine. But here in class, I'm going to be stepping through this stuff. All right, that ends this video.